The phone rang at 3:12 a.m. Not the kind of hour when good news survives. Not the kind of hour when anyone sane calls unless something inside them has cracked open and begun to leak. I stared at the vibrating screen, my name dimly reflected in the black glass. She was calling. Of course she was. 2 days ago, she walked out of the attorney's office with $2 million she didn't earn, didn't expect, didn't deserve. She didn't even look at the urn they handed her, just at me, straight into me, like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. "I'm done with your broke life," she said, voice steady, almost proud. "I'm leaving for Hawaii with my boyfriend. He actually makes me feel alive." I remember setting down my fork and knife, slowly, deliberately, before standing. "All right," I told her. Just that. All right. I didn't chase her, didn't argue, didn't reach for her hand the way she once claimed she used to love. Now, 2 days later, she was calling before dawn, breath probably trembling, mascara smudged from things she thought she deserved. I let the phone ring twice, 3 times, 4 before I answered. Her voice erupted through the speaker, high, frantic, cracking. But I said nothing, just listened, because I already knew this call was coming. Nightmares don't strike out of nowhere. They are planted, watered, tended, and hers began the moment she thought she could bury me alive and walk away clean. People assume betrayal is loud, a slammed door, a confession hurled like a knife. But hers was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you lean in, not out. The days leading up to the will reading had been off. She had become strangely invested in her appearance. New clothes, too bright, perfume, too heavy, smiles, too rehearsed. And then the late-night texts she'd tilt her screen away to read. The sudden insistence that I didn't understand her anymore. The dismissive laugh whenever I talked about rebuilding my career. Still, I stayed silent. I listened to her footsteps shift from familiar to impatient. I watched her eyes avoid mine whenever her phone buzzed. I noticed the new password she swore was just for privacy. I didn't need evidence then. Suspicion itself was a kind of clarity. But the will reading cracked everything open. She sat straighter when the attorney spoke her name. Her legs crossed, her lips pressed together like she was already tasting freedom. When she heard the number, $2 million, something inside her uncoiled. She looked at me, held my gaze longer than she had in months, and right there, in front of the room, she delivered her sentence. "I'm done with your broke life." No hesitation, no guilt, just a rehearsed monologue she'd probably practiced with him, the younger boyfriend she thought was her ticket out. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was the certainty in her eyes, the belief that she'd won, that I was small enough to step over. She left that room lighter than she'd been in years, almost floating. I walked out quietly, letting the world shift beneath us. What she didn't know, what she could never imagine, was that I hadn't been broke for a very, very long time. I didn't follow her to the airport, didn't track her flight, didn't scroll through her social media to see the photos she thought would hurt me. I had no interest in watching her honeymoon without a husband fantasy play out. Instead, I opened the drawer she thought I never opened, her old phone, the one she forgot to wipe, the one synced to every cloud account she didn't know I could access, the one she abandoned the moment she started building her secret life. And just like that, every lie spilled out. Photos, reservations, financial transfers, messages dripping with the kind of affection she hadn't shown me in years. Not just infidelity, mockery. She called me deadweight. She called him the upgrade. She wrote that leaving me would be the clean break she needed to finally live. I scrolled through each message calmly, as if reading a stranger's file. But beneath the calm, something tightened. Not rage, never rage. More like clarity carving itself into bone. While she was in Hawaii, I moved strategically. First, I called the attorney. Not hers, the estate's. I had her father's last signed addendum. She had never read it. She didn't even know it existed. Then I contacted the bank, then my accountant, then my lawyer. Her inheritance wasn't simple. It wasn't liquid. It wasn't even fully hers until probate cleared. And the conditions, buried deep in legal phrasing she never bothered to understand, required one thing: marital stability. No separation, no infidelity, no abandonment. I didn't confront her, didn't text, didn't call. I simply filed. And because I had evidence, her own words, timestamps, photos, the process moved quickly. A clean, precise cut. By the time her plane landed back home, the ground beneath her inheritance was already gone. All that was left was the fall. At 3:12 a.m., her voice shook through the phone. "They froze the account," she cried. "The money, it's gone. They said it's under review because of some claim you filed." I sat in the dark, staring at the faint reflection of myself in the window. "You left," I said quietly, "before the funds cleared." "That doesn't matter," she snapped, panic clawing through every syllable. "It's my inheritance. My father wanted me to have it." "I know," I replied. "That's why he added the clause." She went silent. "What clause?" she whispered. "The one requiring you to remain married and faithful until probate finalizes." The air on her end fractured, tiny, frantic breaths breaking like glass. You knew?" she whispered. "I knew," I said, "long before the will reading." Then I forwarded the files, her texts, her photos, her reservations, her clean break. She didn't speak, didn't breathe. I could almost hear the moment her fantasy collapsed, sharp, sudden, irreversible. She begged first, then she screamed, then she tried to bargain, tears, apologies, promises she didn't even believe. I listened to all of it, calm, even, empty. "You can fix this," she pleaded. "Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you didn't mean to file. I'll come back. We can talk. I'll make it work. Please, please." I didn't file out of anger, I told her. I filed because it was the truth. "And what about me?" she demanded, voice shredding at the edges. "You made your choice," I said. "I just confirmed it." Her breath hitched, one last desperate gasp before reality closed its hand around her. "You ruined me," she whispered. "No," I said. "You did that the moment you thought I wouldn't notice." I hung up before she could answer. Silence filled the room, wide, clean, final. I didn't feel victorious, not relieved, not triumphant, just done. Some truths don't need celebration, they just need air. In the days that followed, she tried reaching out again. Calls, voicemails, emails dripping with regret she should have felt months ago. I didn't answer. She had chosen a life she thought sparkled. Now she could live in the dark that followed. As for me, I stepped back into my own life, quietly, deliberately, leaving hers to collapse under its own weight. People think revenge is fire, but they're wrong. Revenge is ice, silent, controlled, and final. The last thing I told her, the very last, was the simplest truth. I didn't take anything from you, I just stopped holding what was already falling apart, and I never picked it up again.